Hi, this is Gary Tancourt from morethanasnapshot.com. Today we have another session of image critiques from my class that you can take, Introduction to Digital Photography. If you want to join my class, just go to morethanasnapshot.com and sign up. These are some images that were submitted by my students, and we'll take a look at how they did. First off, we have this hummingbird image. And if we look at, impact and storytelling and all those kinds of things, I think that this image does have impact because the bird's very cute. It's got an interesting way of looking at us, and I think that catches your attention, especially because you're so nice and close to it. You know it's a really small bird, and so that would be hard to do. Um, when we look at the image itself, for some technical qualities, if we zoom in on the eye, that would be an important part to be sharp. And you can see here that it is very sharp. All the feather detail is nice and sharp. So that part is done well. The background is blurred out, so that is not distracting. Here we see an unnatural element, the feeder or whatever. If this was going to be strictly a nature image, that would disqualify it because of the feeder. But as far as just in any ordinary image, it's fine to see the feeder. As far as the exposure goes, there is a little bit of overexposure here, but what I noticed is if you try to remove it by taking down the highlights, it brings out these splotches here. So it's much better just to leave it the way it is. The overexposure is not hurting anything. It's not taking away any detail from anything important. So that is not a problem. The one thing is this image does have is some noise. You can see the splotchiness here. When you shoot a fast moving object like a hummingbird, you're probably anticipating a lot of motion and probably used a higher shutter speed. It's not telling me here what you used, but one thing you could do is try to use a little bit of noise reduction. Here we go. Let's see if this helps. I'll zoom in so we can see it. Yeah, that did take it down quite a bit. You don't want to push it too far because then it starts taking away from the detail in the feathers and stuff like that. But I think that this little bit of noise reduction did help quite a bit. And if we look at a before and after, here you can see all this splotchiness, even some red color in here that was splotchy. In here we don't see that anymore because we used some noise reduction. So overall, it's a pretty nice image. I don't see any major flaws in it, and I think it's an interesting subject, so I think it's very good. Alright, next, here we have a supermoon image, and it's probably a panorama stitched together, or it could be just a very thin crop. You can see here that everything is in nice sharp focus. And I'm just checking across to see if it was a panorama, if it was put together well. I'm not noticing any stitching lines, any errors and stuff like that. And the moon looks really cool, especially with this little cloud going around it, and the lights from this little harbor town. It's a very nice image. I like that it's on the left, so your eye comes in, looks at all this detail, and then runs into the moon. The one thing maybe you want to consider is not having this light here. Let's take a look and see if that would affect it. Just because that could help draw our eye out of the image. So if we look at the before and after, oh, it's showing the crop in both the before and after, so that's not really helping us. But I can do this for the before and after. I don't know. I think it helps. It's up to you whether you think it helps or not. But overall, it's a great image. I love the blue sky, I love the interesting moon, the clouds around it, and the little foreground interest here. It's a great shot. Here we have a bee on a flower, and the photographer was telling us that they were working on blurring the background and changing their position. The first time I guess they tried it, there was a driveway in the background, and even blurring it out, the driveway didn't look good, so they changed to where there was grass or some other green leaves, and it made a much nicer background. And I agree, it looks great. And I believe the image was shot at f5.6, and that was enough to give her the blurred background. And we got the shallow depth of field in the front and in the back. And let's see if the B looks like it's sharp. Yeah, and the B is reasonably sharp, mainly in the front here. The I is not really sharp, so that's a little bit of a problem. And the B is not really facing us, so it lacks a little bit of impact because of that. I think we mainly are looking at the leg, especially the leg being in focus. So it's a good practice image, but as far as if it was, for the purpose of a bee being on the flower, I think it's got a few problems. This image, we see a lot more of the background, a lot more of the flower seems to be in focus. And the bee, more of the bee is in focus, and this time I think the eye is in focus. Again, as far as the impact of the image goes, I think the problem is the bee is not really engaging with us very much. The head is almost buried in the flower. The background is nice, though. It's not distracting. One thing you could play around with is finding interesting compositions where this other flower comes into play with it being out of focus. So, not bad. Again, a good practice image. Oh, this image is really nice. You got sunset and the city and some storm clouds. It's got everything going for it. It's got all of that impact. It's got the horizon in the lower third. It's got some interesting light and color, cool looking storm clouds, and I don't see anything that could be better. It looks like a really good image. The quality and the focus and the exposure is all great. Yep, good job. Here we have looks like a family image, and it's pretty cool. It's got impact because the family looks like they're having a good time, and it's a shot that I'm sure that they would love. I do see maybe a few technical little problems with it, but again, the family is not likely to worry about those as long, they're looking at their happy emotions, and I'm sure they're loving the image just the way it is. But if we were to look at some of those, let's first look and see if it's in focus, and it does seem to be all in focus very well. Captured the action very well, and as far as the composition goes, a couple of little problems here. You can see that cut off a hand here, and then part of a hand was cut off here. Now, as a general rule, if you cut something off, it should look like you cut it off on purpose. And if it looks like you cut it off on purpose, it's usually okay. But if it looks like it was an accident that it got cut off, like you weren't quite paying attention to that part, then it is a bit of a problem. And to me, these look like accidents. You got half of a hand. We can see like a thumb coming out here. Here we're losing just the fingers. Also, you don't want to crop at joints. Looks bad. So look around the edges of your frame and make sure you're getting what you want when you take the picture. Especially with people, families, if you need to include a little extra around the edges and then do a little cropping in the computer, sometimes that makes it a little safer. The exposure on them, to me, it's a tad bit dark, and the background is a tad bit bright. So you got to remember that when your scene is sort of backlit like this, you want to use a little bit of exposure compensation and brighten it up so that the people are a little bit brighter. They're not bad. They're pretty good, but they could have been a little bit brighter, and the background could have been a little bit darker. One way you could do this just in camera is to use flashes or strobes to light up the people to make them brighter than the background. That makes the background darker. Normally with a landscape, another thing you could do is use a graduated neutral density filter and darken down the sky. But when you have people in the picture, the people become a problem because now the filter will run into the people. So if you were to take this into Photoshop and do some adjusting, you could make that much better. I can do some basic things here in Lightroom, but again, using that filter would run into the people and would cause some problems. I can basically show you here. If I grab the graduated filter and I'll drag out the filter down here, you can see here the problem is I'm going to run into some of the people. And if I knock down the exposure, well, it helps the sky a little bit, but again, because the image was taken overexposed, the detail here is pretty much gone. Then we could use the paintbrush tool to make the people a bit brighter, and especially on the face and things like that. So give this a little bit of a try and see how it goes. And I could work with the exposure. I'll add just a little bit from the exposure and some from the highlights. Although I don't want to overexpose the side of her face here. I'm just going to do a little bit of that and a little bit more of this. You can go till you overdo it and you start seeing that it's too bright, and then bring it down till it starts looking a bit more natural. So that's almost 2 stops brighter there. And let's see how that looks when we put that away. Before and after. Well, it's part of the way there. It's like I said, it would need more detailed adjustment in Photoshop, but you can see where I'm going with this. Also, the tone of the image is, I think it needs a little more warmth. So let's play around with the white balance a little bit. Yeah, I think a little more warmth livens up the image just a touch. I don't know if you reduce the saturation, but the people in their clothes look a little bit unsaturated. I think the image is kind of cute because the little girl here looks a lot like my youngest daughter. But good job. The food images. These are just great. A big part of food images is the styling and the presentation and the quality of the food that's there. And when you look at this, it's very well done. We have objects in random places, some out of focus, some in focus, so our eye can bounce around the image. And you can see that the food styling was done very well. The food looks fresh and has nice garnishes. And you know, with any food image, if you look at it and go, wow, that looks good, I want to eat some of it, then it was a successful food image. And I think this image is great. It really pulls that off. As far as the lighting goes, the lighting is very nice. We probably are backlit with some natural light. You can see the light hitting here from the back. So we have some highlights and we have some shadows. And so the lighting and everything looks great. And the sharpness is very good. In a food image, not everything is going to be in focus. You want to highlight some important food item, the main subject, and then oftentimes you will have a very shallow depth of field and a lot of other blurred out supporting items. So I really like this image. It's a great job. Again, very well done. The food styling is nice. The food looks very fresh and appetizing, and the lighting is nice. Here we have a little bit more of a side lighting. Again, looks like natural light coming in from the side, and then some out of focus. So we have some visual balance here. We have the main subject in focus here on the right side, and then we have another one back here on the left side at a diagonal, and that's giving some balance to our image. We have to balance the visual weight, so to speak. And the diagonal line often works very well to do that. So again, another great image. The one thing that I wonder about this image is sort of the cool toned, cool white balance to it. Um, I don't know if that it's taking away a little bit from the image. Let's see if we warm it up just a little. No, that's too yellow. Trying to find the right spot. It's hard without having a reference for what kind of light it was. But I think it did benefit a little bit from warming it up just a little. But other than that, it's a great image. Again, very nice. I think in this one, the lighting is not as nice because not enough light, I think, is hitting the main subject here. Maybe if you had put a fill card out in front to bounce some light back here. I think a lot of this is being in shadow. We do have, again, some supporting objects around, which is nice. I find this corner to be a little distracting. So not a bad image, but to me not as strong as the other ones that you had. Alright, in this image, you can see this image has a lot of impact. We have a very cool looking bridge with fireworks over it. Since the bridge is so bright and so sharp, I have to wonder if this was a composite. And the fireworks being so symmetrical, it doesn't really matter whether it was a composite or not because it's still a really cool image. It just sort of seems that way to me. Also, the bridge being cut off like this, that looks a little bit strange, but you know, you don't know what was down here and what kind of angle and opportunity he had. Plus, he had to include the fireworks. So the important part of the image is that you have the interesting part of the bridge here and the fireworks for visual balance up here, and it looks great. So I wouldn't change it, and it's very nice. Here we looks like we have a supermoon image, and I think that we can see here in the histogram that it could have been a little bit brighter. Um, it's fine to underexpose it a little bit when you take the picture, but then afterward we can bump up the brightness just a little bit. See this line right here? That's about the spot we want the highlights to be, roughly. Obviously we have a lot underexposed because it's a black sky, and that's completely fine. And now we'll zoom in and see if it's sharp. And yeah, not bad, reasonably sharp. It has a little bit of a strange crop being up here in the upper left hand corner. I might choose a different crop than that. But let's see. I would either make it like perfectly symmetrical or put it more on the left side. But that's, you know, my personal choice. And let's see how that looks. Even that being a little bit down at the bottom looks a little strange. But other than that, not a bad image. Good practice. Good job. Alright, in this image, the person was playing around with the horizon line, and here you can see they put the horizon line in the upper third, and it looks really good up there, and it's nice and straight, so I think that that's great. As far as the other parts of the composition, when you use a wide angle lens, you got to remember you always have foreground, middle ground, background interest. And I think you do have all that in this image. I think that the problem is you got to remember when you use a wide angle lens, you need to be much closer to the action. So you needed to be much closer to the children because they were the interesting foreground options. So then you would have had your foreground, your middle ground, and your background. Now what we have is a lot of wasted space up here that's really not adding to the story. If we were to crop that, it still may not help it any. Let me take off the restriction for a second. Let's bring it up closer to where the kids are. And I think that's more of what you should have been going for. But you know, if you had done it actually with a lens rather than a crop, it would look different than what we see here. Also, you brought up the issue of not having your tripod and having to shoot at a higher ISO, causing some noise to be in the image. The image does seem to be in focus, so you're right, it's not a focus problem. It's just that noise sort of takes away from some of the clarity of an image. So, you know what? Sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. If you're going to have to shoot at a high ISO, you have to do what you have to do. When you print this, it'll look fine. It's not going to be a problem, but there is going to be noise here because you had to shoot it at a high ISO. If you had used your tripod, you could have shot it at a lower ISO, but like you said, there's movement here. The children are moving around, the waves, so you would have gotten blur. So there are always trade-offs in photography, and this is one sometimes you have to deal with. It also, you could try some noise reduction software. You could try, you know, that's why people spend big bucks on cameras that handle noise really well. You know, noise. We can do more things with digital cameras now than we could ever do with film. So a little bit of noise here is no big deal. The image still looks good, and I think the overall concept for the image is great. The kids look interesting in playing. It's a nice beach scene. Maybe the lighting could have been a little more interesting, and like I said, when you use that wide angle lens, you need to get closer to your subject. Alright, here we have another shot. Again, you were playing with the horizon line, and when we do this, we said that you want to have the most interesting stuff being shown more, and I think that yes, this stuff is more interesting probably than what you had in the sky. There's a little interesting part of the sky here where we can see the sunset, so that part is nice. So I think you did a good job. Again, it's nice and straight. And again, same sort of issue. The foreground is a little bit boring. We have a lot of boring space. It would have been interesting to see if you had come down here somewhere and used this as a leading line wrapping around to these houses rather than capturing just the empty sand. But technically the exposure looks good, the sharpness looks good, and it's a nice looking scene. The bright orange buoys really stand out. I don't think it works too much with the sand image shot, but like I said, a closer image from down here. Now, when you're just looking at water, bright orange buoys, and then the background, I think this makes for an interesting color scheme. Could make for an interesting image. Another one where she was practicing with the horizon line. So let's check the depth of field and see how the focus is. I don't know what f-stop you shot it at, but this all looks good. This is all in focus. Might be a tiny bit down here that's not really that much in focus, but pretty good overall. Again, the exposure looks pretty good. It might be a hair off. We could probably brighten it up just a touch. And again, a nice interesting sky. Here now you have some foreground interest, the rocks and the puddles. Again, I think that this foreground interest is just not strong enough. With a wide angle lens, I would have gotten up closer to the puddles and the rocks, maybe played with the reflections, and some compositions like that. Here we have a before and after scene, and here you can see with um, some photo editing software that you can really improve on the overall impact of an image. In the original capture, he did a good job of capturing the city with the right exposure and being sharp, and all those technical details are looking good. But the problem he had is he had a plain sky. Not much was going on because the sky was overexposed. So he did some work in the photo editing programs like Lightroom, Photoshop, and a plugin I believe he mentioned. And so by bringing back the exposure of the sky, brought back detail in the clouds. And here we can see the God rays coming through the clouds, or they're called precuspular rays. And so that definitely adds a lot more interest, and you can see that these lines are really directing our attention to the city down below. And the cool sort of coffee sort of colored effect at the top warms up the image a little bit, and I think that really helps. The only problem is here's where it goes a little wrong. We have this warm tone up here in the top, and the warm tone is not down here in the bottom. And so I think with your color grading, you would need to do a little bit of work to add some of that color from the top down here at the bottom, because that looks a little bit off. But other than that, it looks very nice. Here we have another food shot, bananas and oranges. Again, natural light coming from the back, and it looks good. Again, not as strong as some of the other food images you had, but basically you have the right concept. You have nice lighting, interesting, vibrant colored food. Again, I would comment that when you shoot food, you want only the best subjects, and here we can see a lot of fruit that is not the best subjects, so I think that takes away from the image. Here we have a bird in flight, looks like possibly an osprey directly overhead, and I think the main thing is that it looks a little lost, just a lot of empty blue around it, and it's a little dark. So let's see if we bring up the exposure. The exposure should be up to here. And now you can see that the bird is a bit brighter. We can see a little more detail in the feathers. And I would crop this a bit. There's just too much blue, and it would help to see more of the bird itself. That's a bit more interesting. This shot had also a little strange looking sort of light bow over here. When I crop in, we don't see it quite as much, but I'm not quite sure what was going on. A little sun flare maybe. So it's an okay shot. Here we have a shot of a cloud again with this band of light. I'm not sure what's going on with this band of light. It's showed up sort of in two pictures now. It does look like it's in focus, however it's way underexposed. You can see all this room here that's showing underexposure. It should have been way up here like this. And I don't know if this is a telephone line. So there are some distractions in the image. The exposure was off, and it looks like it needs some sharpening. And as far as the the impact, the excitingness of the image, I'm just not getting it. Here we have a really cool looking image, a subway scene. We can see the subway signs and the mural in the background, and it's even cool to see that there's people here interacting in the scene, and they're sort of like a silhouette. And so I really like it, and the scene, it's very colorful and bright and interesting, and so the exposure and the sharpness were all done well. To me, the one thing that I might say is, I don't know, the tone of the bricks here are a little different than the tone of the bricks here. So number one, I think there might be too many bricks. And number two, this looks, since this change in tone, it seems like a good as place as any to try cropping that off. So again, I'll unlock it so we can get the full width. And I'll come in just a little tighter. And to me that looks better, but maybe to others it doesn't. It's up to you. It's well, I did cut off some of the shadow. So if that shadow is important, maybe we can just come to here. Oh yeah, it's a tough decision because now we end up with just one circle. Maybe cut off a little bit of the shadow. I think I like that better. As far as the words in an image, again, anytime you have words in an image, people are going to have their eyes drawn to that first. You always read what's in the picture first, so you have to remember that that's taking away from your subject. But I think you get away with it in this image because the words here really are an integral part of the image, because they show us the setting, that it is a subway system and that there are signs, and so I think in this case it's fine to leave them. But a cool image. Good job. Okay, here we have another family image, and you can see that it's backlit, and we have the highlights here. And I think this time it's better because the background is a little darker. It wasn't quite as bright as the last time. And their exposure on their faces is better. It's not quite as dark as it was before. And the overall, composing of the people is nice. Anytime you can make triangles, you've got a good composition. And so here we have sort of a nice triangle shape, and that works well. The family looks happy and interacting, and so I'm sure that they would like this image. On the technical side, I see that the hair here and the side of the shoulder is a bit overexposed. Not by much, but if it was a raw file, you could tone some of that down. On this JPEG, there's probably nothing we can do about it. It is cool to see the highlights in the hair. Other than that, I think it's just that it's a little bit overdone on this section. If it were me, I would either tone down this edge or crop it out. So if I go to something like the vignette tool, maybe that's, obviously it's too heavy. Add a little bit of vignette. Maybe I'll use the brush tool and knock down the exposure just of these branches and grass back here. We don't want that to be so bright because that will take our eyes away from the important part of the image, which is the people. So if you have any real bright areas in the background, you want to tone those down so that we concentrate on the people. As far as their pose is concerned, like I said, I liked most of it. The one thing that's a little awkward to me is that she's leaning her chin on his shoulder. So if you're looking at that when you're taking the picture, you might ask her to do something different. And it's all right to have her snuggle up close, but to actually have her like leaning on the shoulder, that looks a little strange. Also, I know it's tough when you're shooting people because you've got a million things to think about, and you can't see everything. That's one thing that helps to have, an assistant or something, someone helping you and watching and doing all that. But when the wind carries some hair into her face, that's a problem. It can be photoshopped out, but it's a whole lot easier if you capture it. If you fix it before you take the picture, it saves you a lot of time in Photoshop. With the child sucking its thumb there, with the kids, as far as their expressions, you're lucky if you get them to look at you. So that's not quite as big a deal. But I think this part here is a little bit of a problem. And also in your software, there are ways of getting rid of the little flyaways. You can leave some flyaways, obviously, a little bit, but some of the major ones up here you could get rid of. But overall, again, a nice family image. Good job. And I believe that that is my last image. So keep practicing, keep submitting your images, and I hope these critiques were helpful. And we'll see you again next week. This has been Gary D. Toncourt from morethanasnapshot.com.